I'm a lawyer, back to lawyers. There's precedent of Roethlisberger, Elliott, Kareem Hunt getting 6 to 8 games with no criminal charges. No criminal charges. And of course, Watson has no criminal charges. But those were one woman. So I just don't see how he plays this year according to the NFL suspension. The NFLPA will challenge it, of course. But I don't see him playing. I see the suspension being all year.
Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365 with Mac and Matt. We had a third voice for our final 20, 30 minutes here. Always a pleasure when we get on the executive director of the very prestigious Villanova Law School, still SI contributor, podcast host, Business of Sports, as good a sports podcast as is out there, and former NFL executive. We just ran out of time. It takes me that long to go through his list of credentials. Andrew Brandt joins us here on Birds 365. How are you, Andrew?
I'm doing well. Good to see you guys. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Andrew. I guess we'll start with, why not, Daniel Snyder in front. Not in front. Obviously, he was not. Roger Goodell. His job is the lightning rod. I'd like to call him the highest paid lightning rod in the world.
Right.
Sort of deflecting the dog and pony show. That was the House Oversight Committee. But your thoughts on where we are with Daniel Snyder? I think we've gotten this sea change, Andrew, where I think the league would like to get rid of him. And in theory, they can do that, I think, with 24 votes. Do you think it's a possibility that Daniel Snyder eventually is going to lose control of the Washington Commanders?
Well, a lot to unpack here, John. I mean, one thing that you're right, obviously, about, I've been talking about this for 10 years, that Roger Goodell is paid to take the bullets, take the heat, take the missiles, so the owners don't have to. Some people don't realize that's a big part of his job.
Oh, yeah.
You know, back in the day, we talked about a commissioner as best interest of the game, and I teach this in my classes. It was for the players, for the owners, for the game, for the fans. But we've gotten such big money into sports right now that they're really there to serve the interests of their constituents, the owners. And boy, was he doing that well. I mean, he deflected. He let these congressmen, or at least half of them, go hard at him, and strident questioning, all because Daniel Snyder's on the south of France on a yacht and couldn't be bothered to take an hour with the most supreme body in this land. So Goodell did his bidding. And yes, he earned a good chunk of his $64 million that day. And Goodell has a great way of answering questions without answering questions.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. He's great at that. So I'm not as bullish as you, John, on the possibility of ousting him, because this has been decades where he hasn't changed the name, decades where there's been a toxic workplace. He's got financial improprieties. He has allies. And if Roger Goodell had 24 votes to remove him, I think that would have happened. I don't think he's going to call for a vote unless he has 24 votes. Yeah. And I just don't think so. I mean, I know at one time, him and Jerry Jones, Snyder and Jones were very close. I think that's still the case. I don't know. And of course, Jones wields a lot of influence.
Yes.
All right, let me try and narrow focus it even more than that about those 24 votes. How many of those fall into the category of there, but for the grace of videotape, go I? That they're actually worrying about, if I kick out one of my boys, right, who they coming for next? Now they're going to set the narrow focus in on me. How much of that plays in the behind the scenes conversation that are going on between the owners of Roger Goodell?
Yeah, I think so. And I just mentioned Jones. I mean, in the past 3 months, we've heard about Jones having a secret child. We've heard about Jones's top PR guy who was peeping Tom. Cheerleaders' locker room. So
God, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. I think there's some of that, Jody. I really do. The other thing is, precedent. Forget about skeletons in the closet. do we really want to have a precedent where owners can get kicked out for bad behavior? Again, think about this in another context. Can someone have his business taken away because I don't know, whatever. So, and think about owners coming in and paying billions of dollars. If that's on the table, maybe they don't pay billions of dollars, and that's another thing to think about. So I just, I'm not seeing it. He's survived this long. I think he'll continue to survive. Unless this is from a Washingtonian who friends and family are still telling me, how do we get him out?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, now you mentioned that word precedent, Andrew. Some argue that there already is a precedent with Jerry Richardson.
Yeah.
I don't think the NBA, matters, but they've done it with Donald Sterling. The Richardson case, though, because that's more, I think, valid when it comes to the NFL. Is that just the difference there? Is that Jerry was willing to walk away versus
so.
Daniel Snyder?
I think so. I mean, Jerry Richardson in my day, I was in the league from 99 to 09. He was a player. Jerry Richardson was a big time owner in terms of policy. That's changed. He kind of fell out, maybe had some issues, and he wanted out. And I think that's the difference. I think this was an aging owner that wanted out. This guy in Washington does not want out. He wants to stay in as long as he can.
All right. One of my favorite lines that you use on social media, there will be lawyers, certainly is on point with Deshaun Watson on many different levels. We've already been dealing with it, and lawyers making comments and lawyers call a press conference. I want to specifically tie you down on lawyers for the Texans. That they have settled 20 of 24 cases, but there are still 4 sitting out there. And the whole story came out about a Texans employee giving Deshaun Watson an NDA to cover his own backside because some of the massage sessions he's having were going sideways and the like. I thought that made them complicit, at least in part. If they all get settled, then it's no skin off the Texans' back. But if these last 4 are going to be difficult, can the Texans get drawn into it legally? Will they need lawyers?
Yeah, I think they will, because not so much the women. I would just think that this is something that the NFL would look into. Listen, let's be honest. My experience, the Packers, the Eagles, all the teams do special things for their superstars, but there's a line, like for Brett Favre, for Aaron Rodgers, their agents got full run of the place. Other agents didn't, their families did. Other families didn't. You just do these kind of things. But this seems crossing the line. Now, if they sort of had a relationship with this swanky hotel in Houston and said, yeah, he's our star, let him use it, I guess that's okay. But the word, and I had Jenny Ventris from the New York Times who broke this story on my podcast. The word that got me antenna was arranged. Houston Texans arranged for this. I don't know legally if that would imply that the women could sue, but if I'm the NFL, I'm like, arranged? What does that mean? Paid for? Because paid for is outside the cap.
Right.
You can't give a player any compensation outside the cap. So I would be, if I'm the NFL, I'd be looking into that, and maybe they already have. But broadly more on Watson, Jody, I've been consistent on this. I'm a lawyer, back to lawyers. There's precedent of Roethlisberger, Elliott, Kareem Hunt getting 6 to 8 games with no criminal charges. And of course, Watson has no criminal charges, but those were one woman. So I just don't see how he plays this year, according to the NFL suspension. The NFL PA will challenge it, of course, but I don't see him playing. I see the suspension being all year.
I think a lot of people are leaning that way, Andrew, but it's interesting because the new CBA has kind of shifted the system.
Yeah.
And previously, Roger Goodell was sort of the judge, the jury, the executioner, so to speak. Now they have an independent arbiter. It's going to be Sue Robinson. But it's interesting. This is the interesting part to me. So the NFL can evidently recommend a punishment, and that is expected to be a pretty significant recommendation, as you mentioned. The NFLPA can offer their recommendation. Sue makes the decision, and then both sides can appeal that decision. And if they appeal that decision, it goes back to Roger Goodell. That just seems so convoluted to me. So we have an extra layer.
This is the product of bargaining where they didn't want him judge, jury, and executioner, and now he's just appellate judge. but but as appellate judge, he has final say. Now, it's a little unclear if he can raise the penalty. But anyway, this is the way it is. But Sue Robinson's a judge, so yeah. I think a judge, I think precedent, I think a lawyer. So I think she's going to see it the way we see it.
Oh.
All right, Andrew, let me ask you a broader based question when it comes to, as John just touched on, the collective bargaining. They're forming a search committee to potentially find DeMaurice Smith's replacement. He is still in place as the head of the NFLPA, but when you're putting a search committee together to find his replacement, means you're not going to be there forever. The players continue to lose the collective bargaining group, and there's so many layers to it. You're so more adept at being able to analyze this than someone like me and John, but it seems to me, just from a novice point of view, the players always come up short. The owners cling to every single dollar they can, and the only give back they give the players is less work. And oh, by the way, the Philadelphia Eagles, in a world of less work less work than anybody else. But I am digressing and getting off on my Eagle rant. Will the next time they go to and I know it's years down the road, will the players ever actually get the owners to give up a sliver more of the actual financial pie? Or will they just continue to win these hollow victories of, hey, you can only practice for 90 minutes on a given Wednesday?
Yeah. I mean, that's been 2 bargaining agreements, Jody, where if I'm an owner, I'm like, you mean we can get the deal we want economically if we just have them practice less in May, in April and May and June? Like, cool, and so I don't know. Listen, there are a lot of people that say, oh, they'll never get benefits because they're not willing to strike. They're not willing to sit out. Well, baseball and basketball and hockey have made gains without this sort of resigned feeling that they'll never stay together and all that. I'm not sure football players realize the power they have sometimes. It'll be interesting with a new director, that's going to come. Maybe it doesn't come soon with this search committee. Maybe it's just for the future when DeMaurice Smith does voluntarily step down. But as you said, we're locked into this agreement to 2030. So maybe the new guy will be stronger in getting gains for the players.
Andrew, recently on Sports Illustrated, you took a look. We mentioned Deshaun from a Houston perspective, but from a Cleveland perspective, they're the team that gave him the first ever fully guaranteed 5-year deal in the history of the NFL. And obviously that has made them sort of a pariah amongst certain other organizations in the league. But right now they have 2 quarterbacks on their roster. I think you mentioned account for $65 million. And your thought process is neither will be on the team or playing for the team. Deshaun's actually going to be on the team, but likely suspended. How do you do that if you're the Cleveland Browns?
Well, that's why they signed a guy named Jacoby Brissett as a placeholder. But quick 2 things. Watson, you hear my thoughts on that. So he got a $45 million bonus, $1 million salary. The $1 million is the only thing that's affected by suspension.
Yeah.
What the Browns did, I know Browns fans tell me, hey, they've done that for other players. I guess, but they haven't done it for anyone facing suspension. So $45 million, if he settled each of those cases for $500, grand. That's 10 million out of his 45 million. Not
Well, it
bad.
was 100 grand, the original. We don't
Well,
know
yeah.
that, but
I'm
it
sure
might
it's
have gone up. Yeah.
So I don't think he'll play the Mayfield thing. They exercised the option 2 years ago. He's got 19 guaranteed. I outlined three ways they can deal with him. One, they trade him with an asset. Someone take the 19 million, give him a second round pick to do it. They're probably not going to do that because they got no first round picks coming up. Or pay off part of the contract, maybe pay him 9 or 10 million as a bonus, like a going away present. And so the new team only gets 9 million to deal with. But it is a chance they could Deshaun Watson him. In other words, like Houston, they can just have him there and say, shut up, stay home, and you'll get your $1 million plus a week. And that could happen, probably would only happen if no one wants him. And I'm not sure anybody wants him. I mean, people bring up Seattle, Carolina. I mean, if they wanted him, I think they'd have him by now to have been in their mini camps. But I'm not, and that's an amazing statement, right? The number one pick in 2018 led the team to the AFC Championship, and no one wants him. That's quite a statement.
Yeah, how the mighty have fallen. This is something that I think you can shed light on that maybe John and I wouldn't, because you're ahead of the curve. And when it comes to trends of salaries in the National Football League, that was your bailiwick. You were a cap guy when you were in the league. We saw this offseason, the salaries for top flight wide receivers just go through the roof. A quick rise. There's always the incremental increases because the league generates more revenues because their TV contracts go up every single year. So we understand everybody's making more money in the NFL these days. But every once in a while, you see a trend where there's a major tick up at a position. It was quarterbacks before. This offseason, it was wide receivers.
Yeah.
If we're talking about percentages, is there another position that you think, Jody, keep your eye out in the next year or two, the percentage increase for the top flight players at this position could go up exponentially?
Well, you're right about receiver. There are a lot of teams cursing the Eagles right now because it's one thing for Devontae and Tyreek to get those massive extensions, but A.J. Brown was only in a rookie deal, and that's different. That's different. So, yeah, that wide receiver position went crazy. I'm going to go with a boring answer on the other one because it's quarterback because of Watson. Now, we're going to see not so much the number. There were guys in the 40s. This guy's 46. But I'm talking more about the guarantee. Will other teams do this? T. Bisciotti made some comments at the owners' meeting. That's the guy we're looking at. Lamar Jackson, whether he's got an agent or not an agent, doesn't matter. If he's going to get a 5-year fully guaranteed $46 million plus, and you know what, he should, because they can explain away Watson all they want, but that's the market. And Jackson's had a better career than Watson and been less injured. So I don't know how the Ravens get out of that deal, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
I know you got to run, Andrew, at Andrew Brandt. Follow him there on Twitter, si.com. Real quick, the escrow issue with some cash board teams. If you're Joe Burrow, you're Justin Herbert, and you look at Deshaun Watson, I'm going to say I'm going to start at $240 million. Can cash board teams afford to do that?
That's a real problem. You talked about two teams that can, because they're family owned. The Browns own the Bengals. The Spanos own the Chargers, and those teams are not, billionaire owners. And it's $180 million in escrow for Watson from the Haslams. $180 million. Now, can the Browns put $180 million in escrow? Can the Spanoses? I mean, these families came up as when the franchises were worth $80 million. So I don't know. That's why this deal, to me, I've been writing about it all off season, is just stunning. Stunning that, well, I guess the legal outed, of course, but it's the impact. And we've only seen one big quarterback deal since. That's Derek Carr. They didn't go into all these guarantees. The one to watch is Jackson, and then next year those two guys.
Going to be very interesting. It is always interesting when you say you'll come on with us, Andrew Brandt. Thank you very much for doing so today. We'll get you back on when we get closer to the beginning of the season. But thanks for giving us a summer insight.
Thanks, guys. And people were asking about the newsletter. It's at
shoot.
Andrew-Brandt.com is how you sign up. Every Sunday, I give a free newsletter.
I read it every single Sunday. Give me the for those who want it, and you should sign up today because it's free. Give the email address one more time for everybody.
Yeah, go to Andrew-Brandt.com and sign up right there.
Outstanding Sunday reading each and every single week with made reference to it here.